My wife changed after a work trip. I first noticed a change in my wife, Sarah, about 6 or 7 months ago. She had just returned from her company's annual trip. Usually she returned from these excursions energized, full of anecdotes about her coworkers, and eager to share minor experiences that had amused or inspired her. This time things were different. Her temperament had changed noticeably since the day she returned home. She didn't discuss much about the vacation, which surprised me. When I asked if anything had happened, she simply shook her head and dismissed my concerns. At first I attributed it to the usual post-trip fatigue. Maybe she was just exhausted from all the traveling, socializing, and team-building activities. But even after a few days her behavior didn't improve. In fact, it worsened. Sarah became angry with me, starting arguments over trivial matters that wouldn't have bothered her before. Before this, we rarely fought. Our relationship was always healthy, but suddenly the usual calm was replaced by strain. It was as if she was actively searching for reasons to argue, and these disagreements seemed to come out of nowhere. A comment that would have made her laugh now resulted in a sigh, or worse, a fight. I couldn't understand where this sudden frustration was coming from. It wasn't just the arguments. Sarah began to isolate herself. We had a weekly date ritual which could be as simple as getting coffee or going for a walk in the park. These outings were meaningful because they gave us a chance to reconnect, unwind, and focus on each other away from work and daily distractions. But Sarah started canceling our dates, offering increasingly dubious explanations. She'd complain about being too tired or having too much work to catch up on, even on weekends. My concern grew as the cancellations increased. I missed spending time with her, our connection, our laughter. Her mood swings became more pronounced. One minute she seemed fine, and the next she was moody and withdrawn. It was like she was retreating within herself. Naturally, my mind began to wander. I worried that she was losing interest in me, or worse, that she had fallen in love with someone else. I didn't want to think about it, but her behavior seemed so strange and out of character that I couldn't help but contemplate possibilities I hadn't considered before. When I eventually confronted Sarah with my fears, she was adamant. She insisted there was no one else but me. She even gaslighted me, claiming that I was overthinking things and that she simply needed time to sort things out in her life. So I gave her space, believing that whatever she was going through would resolve itself with time. I figured if I didn't press her and just let her breathe, she'd eventually come around, and things would go back to normal. But that didn't happen. In fact, the more space I gave her, the farther away she seemed to drift. She started working longer hours and would come home late, sometimes after I'd already gone to bed. She would tell me stories about her day, hilarious anecdotes about her coworkers or complaints about office drama, but when she came home there was only silence. She became evasive when I tried to question her, and her actions began to raise more concerns. With our relationship on unstable ground, I suggested that we seek marriage counseling. I hoped that with the help of a professional, Sarah might open up to me and we could figure out what was causing our disconnect. To my surprise, she declined, stating that she wanted to visit a therapist independently to focus on herself before we worked on our relationship. Though it wasn't what I had hoped for, I agreed. Ultimately, I just wanted to support her in whatever way she needed. Sarah soon found a therapist and started attending 3 sessions a week, each lasting 2 hours. I didn't ask too many questions, assuming she had found someone qualified to help. All I wanted was for her to gain clarity and calm so that we could reconnect. After each session, Sarah seemed to be in a better mood, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I hoped this was a sign that things would improve between us, that this was the start of a new chapter in our relationship. But instead things became stranger. Sarah began spending more time away from home, frequently making plans without me. It started with a few evenings here and there, but it quickly turned into almost every weekend. She'd go out with no real explanation and wouldn't return until late at night. I didn't mind her going out with friends. I'd always encouraged her to have a life outside our marriage, but I expected her to at least give me a heads up. Her sudden absences, along with her failure to keep me informed, made me feel neglected in my own marriage. What troubled me even more was when I realized almost accidentally that Sarah wasn't just spending time with friends. Apparently, she was also hanging out with strangers she met at bars. This was something she had never told me. I only found out after several of my friends mentioned they'd seen her at bars dancing with strange men, apparently intoxicated and acting in ways that were completely out of character for her. They recognized her as my wife. It was humiliating to learn of her behavior secondhand, knowing that others were observing her actions while I remained in the dark. I was absolutely confused, dealing with the embarrassment and uncertainty her behavior had caused. When I finally gathered the courage to bring it up, hoping for an open discussion, Sarah dismissed my concerns. She waved them off, saying she was just having fun and that dancing and talking to strangers didn't mean she was doing anything inappropriate. She said it as if her actions were insignificant and that I shouldn't be upset by this version of herself I hardly recognized. Then she stopped helping around the house. Since both of us started working, we had always divided household tasks evenly. I cooked and packed our lunches every day, while Sarah handled the dishes. This system worked well for us. But suddenly Sarah stopped fulfilling her part of the bargain. She began complaining about how oppressive housekeeping felt, claiming none of her friends had to work both at their jobs and at home. Our mutual understanding, the give and take that kept our home in order, was suddenly gone. I tried to understand her point of view, but I couldn't ignore the facts. I pointed out that if she was comparing herself to her friends, most of them were stay-at-home spouses who spent their days running their households. If she was feeling overwhelmed with both work and housework, however, if she didn't want to quit her job, she needed to understand that we both had to share the household responsibilities. After all, I had never complained about the work I did, so why was she suddenly bringing it up? Sarah insisted that she no longer wanted to do housekeeping. She said her work obligations were already too taxing, and she didn't want to come home and work on top of that. She told me I needed to step up and handle things around the house until she felt more prepared. Since then, I've been managing all of the household responsibilities by myself, cooking, cleaning, and doing laundry. I hoped that she would finally recognize and appreciate my efforts, but unfortunately my work has gone unnoticed. Then, 2 months ago, I learned something shocking. Sarah had been going around the neighborhood spreading false allegations about me. I found out from a few of my male neighbors whose wives were friends with Sarah. These friends who had known me, she had been telling them that I was a domineering, toxic husband, and that I never allowed her to live peacefully. When some of these women asked what I had done to make her feel this way, as a result, she felt unfulfilled in our marriage. She even told them that she had started fantasizing about exploring her femininity with other men. At first, I didn't believe it. This didn't sound like Sarah. She was always discreet about our relationship and avoided discussing personal topics with our friends. So why would she lie about me? I'd never stopped her from doing anything. She'd been doing whatever she wanted for months while I stood by. Yet suddenly, I was to blame for being toxic and repressing her. I confronted Sarah about it. I asked her if it was true, and I wanted to hear her side of the story. To my surprise, she didn't deny it. She calmly admitted that she had shared her dissatisfaction with her friends. She said she had started resenting me and blamed me for everything, including her decision to act out. Sarah then revealed that her therapist, who was an old friend of hers named Jack, had played a significant role in shaping her behavior. Sarah explained that Jack had convinced her that I was the source of her dissatisfaction, painting our marriage as stifling and oppressive. He had even suggested that she explore an open marriage as a way to rediscover herself. I was shocked. This therapist was no therapist at all. He was simply a friend who was encouraging her to take drastic and destructive steps. I was devastated. This wasn't how I imagined our marriage to be. I had tried everything: patience, support, and understanding, but now it seemed clear that Sarah had made her own choices, influenced by someone who had only worsened her mindset. It's been a month since the day Carla came clean about her infidelity and the destructive influence her old friend Elle had on her. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks, and though part of me had suspected something was off for months, hearing the full story from her felt surreal. I'd been through so much already, trying to understand the shift in her behavior, all the gaslighting, the fights, the confusion, and her bizarre suggestions for an open marriage. But nothing could have prepared me for the truth. Everything I had been dealing with was based on Carla's own internal confusion, influenced by a person I didn't even know existed until now. Since our conversation, I've had time to process everything. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, betrayed not only by Carla, but by the way Elle had manipulated her. Elle's influence on Carla was evident in every decision she made, every step she took towards a path that was so far removed from the woman I had married. It made me question everything. Was this really the woman I had spent years with? How could she have gotten so lost in someone else's advice that she turned against the life we had built together? The most difficult part has been the lingering emotional turmoil. Part of me wanted to offer forgiveness, to move past this and rebuild something together. But every time I considered it, I remembered the lies, the emotional abuse, and how Carla had betrayed me. I realized that my desire to fix things wasn't about the relationship we had, it was about the person I thought Carla was. I had spent months, if not longer, fighting for something that was already long gone. When Carla had first confessed, she was genuinely remorseful, or at least it seemed that way. She cried, begged, and pleaded for another chance, promising that she had learned from her mistakes and would go to therapy truly this time. But I couldn't ignore the nagging thought that if I let her back in, it would be like inviting the chaos back into my life. The last thing I wanted was to allow her to manipulate me once more, to get back into a cycle of false promises and gaslighting. Despite her promises to do whatever it took to make amends, I could see right through her. I could tell she was still caught up in the idea that she had lost something by being with me. She'd been so focused on getting validation from other men and indulging in a new sense of freedom that I wondered if she could ever truly be the woman I once knew. One of the most painful realizations came when I took a closer look at how Carla's new version of herself was so far removed from the woman I married. It wasn't just her actions that had changed; her entire outlook on life had shifted. She spoke with such detachment, almost as if the person she once was had died and been replaced by someone else. She'd completely rewritten the narrative of our marriage in her own mind, painting me as the villain and she as the misunderstood, trapped woman trying to break free. The most heartbreaking part was that Carla didn't seem to understand the gravity of what she had done. While she was willing to acknowledge her infidelity and the mistakes she had made, she never once seemed to grasp the true hurt she had caused me. She never once acknowledged the emotional toll it took on me to watch my wife slowly disappear, to watch her become a shadow of herself while I tried desperately to keep our relationship intact. Instead, she was focused on what she wanted: her freedom, her excitement, and ultimately her sense of self. As the weeks went on, Carla continued reaching out to me. She sent texts apologizing for her behavior, expressing her sadness over the breakdown of our marriage. Yet her apologies felt empty to me. I couldn't shake the feeling that if she really understood the damage she had caused, she would have tried harder to repair the relationship from the start, not waited until everything fell apart. She seemed more concerned about losing her sense of autonomy and control than actually facing the consequences of her actions. I tried to have an honest conversation with Carla about what went wrong, about where we had both failed in the relationship. She would say things like, "I just want to feel like myself again," or "I don't know who I am anymore." But the truth was she didn't know how to be with me. She didn't know how to be with anyone who had expectations or boundaries. She was caught up in the idea of self-discovery at all costs, no matter who she hurt in the process. My friends have been incredibly supportive during this time, though their advice has been mixed. Some say I should give Carla a chance, that people can change, that perhaps I could help her rebuild herself. But the truth is I don't believe in that anymore. Not with Carla. Not after everything that's happened. There was a time when I would have fought tooth and nail to salvage our marriage, but now I realize that it was never about the relationship. It was about Carla's own insecurities, her need for validation, and her fear of growing old and settling down. I'm not sure if she ever truly loved me in the way I loved her. I'm not sure if she ever could, given how easily she abandoned me for the promises of excitement and freedom that another person offered her. One thing has become painfully clear. Carla's growth came at the expense of everything we had built together. The relationship, the trust, the partnership, it was all swept away in the wake of her quest to rediscover herself, whatever that means. And as much as I loved her once, I realized that this version of her, the one shaped by Elle's influence, is not someone I can live with. I've officially begun the process of moving on. I filed for divorce last week. The paperwork is being processed, and as much as it stings to see it all finalized, I know it's the right decision. I don't need to be trapped in a marriage where I'm constantly questioning my worth and fighting for someone who's lost all respect for me. I deserve peace, and I deserve a partner who values me, not someone who uses me as a stepping stone to fulfill their own desires for freedom and excitement. What's been most difficult, though, is how everything has played out in the community. Carla has continued to spread rumors about me, painting me as the villain in our story. I've had people approach me, asking if the things she said were true, and I've had to set the record straight. But it doesn't change the fact that the people who know us, who once respected our relationship, it's humiliating, but I try to remind myself that I'm doing what's best for me and that I can't control how others perceive it. Now I'm focusing on rebuilding my life. I'm reconnecting with friends, rediscovering passions I had neglected, and slowly learning to enjoy life again without the constant weight of Carla's presence hanging over me. I'm learning what it means to take care of myself, to prioritize my own well-being over someone else's demands and fantasies. The pain of this divorce is real, and I know it's going to take time to fully heal. But I'm done fighting for someone who has shown me time and again that they don't know what they want and that they're willing to destroy everything just to feel validated. It's hard to walk away from someone you thought you would grow old with, but I've come to realize that walking away was the best thing I could do for myself.